Okay, so I'll start recording. Did I already share my screen? Here, I'll share my screen. Um, but so we're doing the second half of Genesis today. Um, and we're gonna go off on some tangents today, but that should be fine. Okay, so Noah and the flood. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. Noah had three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy the earth. Make yourselves an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark is 300 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, its height 30 cubits. Make a roof of the ark. Finish it to a cubit above, and set the door of the ark on its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh in which the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die, but I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark. You, your sons, your wife, your sons' wives with you, and every living thing of all flesh you shall bring two of every sort into the ark, and keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds according to their kinds, and the animals according to their kinds, and every creeping thing on the ground according to its kind, two of every sort shall come into you to keep them alive. Also take with you every sort of food that is eaten, uh, and store it up. It shall serve as food for you and them. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. So it starts off with these are the generations of Noah. So that's that header that I talked about. And so now it's going to go into the story um, uh, of Noah. Um, and so the first thing here, Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. Uh, I'm going to use this as kind of a springboard to talk about some stuff that I had intended to talk about last week, um, but didn't. Um, and the broad category of things that I want to talk about is could could be classified as proof texting. Um, so we're going to talk about two different um, kind of theological views, and talk about how they do proof texting in this passage. And we're going to talk about how I think both of them do it wrong. Um, and yeah, and I will give the spoiler alert here. The reason why I think both of them are doing it wrong is because both of them are taking um, very wooden, literalistic understandings of what is being said and applying it in a very, I guess I would say, basic way without thinking about what's really going on. Um, and that's sort of what proof texting is. Um, a lot of times when people say proof text, right, it's just when you find a verse that supports your view. And that's always a good thing to do. But if you're proof texting, it's like you're going to that verse just to make your point and you're not actually thinking about what that verse is saying. And that's what I think both of these camps are doing. So the first one is going to be the Calvinist camp. And we're going to dunk on Calvinists for a little bit here. Did someone else join? Yeah, Diego did. Okay, Diego, you came for the important part. Okay, so if you just Google proof text for total depravity, one of the main ones that come up is this Genesis 6:5. And so the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intention of his thoughts, of his heart, was only evil continually. So Calvinists will often use this verse in their doctrine of total, for saying why their doctrine of total depravity is correct. And for a brief overview, the doctrine of total depravity is basically the idea that mankind, because of the fall of Adam, are in a state of spiritual death. And because they are spiritually dead, it is impossible for mankind to be good or righteous. Mankind is totally ontologically depraved. And the only way that a man can become not that is if they are regenerated by God. And so man needs to be regenerated and needs to be given a new heart, and that is and so in that way it is completely it is completely God's prerogative on to who is saved and who's not saved, and people's individual actions really have nothing to do with it at all. Okay. The reason why I'm choosing to talk about this here is because in my opinion, this proof text is immediately undermined by this verse that we just read, right? Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, right? Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord, right? There is nothing in here about Noah's righteousness being derivative of a previous action by God, right? If it was, the Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord actually doesn't really make sense, because right, it's the favor comes like from Noah, right? Like like these verses would need to say something else about the Lord choosing to regenerate or fix Noah in some sense, in order so that he could become righteous, right? And you hear this a lot with the no one is righteous, no one, not one, right? Which comes from Psalms, right? No one does good, not even one. And it's like, okay, those are Psalms. Like, those aren't strict rules. Like, even here, right? We have it in this thing of, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, but I'm going to put you in an ark, right? And so, um, the Bible, like, and this is what I'm talking about. Of whenever I say things like we have to be careful about how we read the Bible, about how we do proof texting. It's like even within the passage itself, you have an example of God using the word all and him immediately not meaning every single bit of flesh. um, And so it's ridiculous to take a verse that is supposed to be used uh, this verse isn't even describing the state of humanity forever. It's describing the state of humanity at this time, and the solution to this is that he's going to do the flood. And so if you take this like Calvinist stance of, oh, this is a permanent state, that this right here is describing a permanent state that human beings are in, you actually have a similar problem to all the Nephilim stuff that we talked about last week, which is, well, if the purpose of the flood was to fix all of this, if this is still here, why did the flood occur, right? Um, I think we would need to say that what this is describing is it's describing something at the time. Now you can say that, oh, things are getting worse, and we're approaching a time that's similar to the days of Noah, like, or something like that. That's fine. If you're just trying to talk about general amounts of like sin in the world, I would contest that, because I actually think that the Church of Jesus Christ is working and moving, and things are not as bad as it was back then, and I don't think it ever necessarily will get as bad as that. Um, but yeah, so that's why I think that is wrong. So I know there's only two of you here. Any questions about that? I made my case about Calvinists being wrong. I know neither of you are ready to die on the hill of Calvinism. But I'll also use this opportunity to argue against something else that maybe you guys have heard of. So, do you guys know what dynamic omniscience is? You have to unmute yourselves. Okay. Do you know what open theism is? Okay. Okay. Well, I'll explain both of them. They're more or less the same thing. So, here, we'll just read this. Dynamic omniscience, often associated with open theism, posits that God knows all that is knowable, including the infinite possibilities of the future, but that the future itself is partially, or most of them will say fully, open and not exhaustively determined. Basically, what this means is that open theists or dynamic omniscience proponents will, I'm simplifying this, and they'll quibble with the terms, but basically it's the idea that God doesn't know the future. And what they'll say is that, well, it's not that God doesn't know the future, it's that the future isn't really a thing that exists. And so because the future isn't really a thing that exists, the future is not knowable. And so that's why it says here, posits that God knows all that is knowable. And so they'll be like, oh no, God's omniscience, right? So omniscience is all knowingness. That they'll be like, God is omniscient. It's just that the future isn't a thing that you can know. They think that that knowing the future is a logical impossibility. In the same way that someone like William Lane Craig would argue that like God doesn't know logical impossibilities, like God doesn't know like how to make a square circle or how to make a married bachelor, because those things are logical impossibilities, and so God doesn't know those things um, because those things don't exist. I find this argument to be kind of ridiculous. And it's a growing it's a growing, I don't know if you want to say movement or thought process that is happening in online Bible spaces, kind of in a similar way that conditional immortality or annihilationism is kind of um, becoming in vogue, and a lot of people are starting to adopt that more and more. Dynamic omniscience is becoming more and more popular. Um, and so, because of that, one of the main ways that the dynamic omniscience guys argue is they will look for places in scripture where um, they'll say that, like, God is acting in time, or God is kind of like making a change. And they will use that God is making a change as evidence for, well, God didn't really know what the future was, and he is now responding to it. And so now you can maybe see why that's relevant, because they'll read this passage here where it says, "And the Lord regretted that he had made them," and it says, "For I am sorry that I have made them." Right? They'll use this part to say, see, this shows that um, this shows that God didn't know that this state of affairs, all of this stuff beforehand, that man, we're going to become wicked and there's going to be all this violence. He didn't know that that was what was going to happen. To kind of steel man them a little bit, a lot of them will try to argue that um, God probably knew that it was a possibility, but he didn't know 100% that it would occur. Um, I think that this is ridiculous, and I ultimately think that the dynamic omniscience guys actually, funnily enough, make the same mistake that the Calvinist guys do, which is that they think that foreknowledge is causal. And so they think that if God actually has foreknowledge, that that causes that thing to be true. Um, and I don't think that's the case. But I'm going to drop that for a second and talk about specifically what's going on here. So, when the Bible is doing things like it says, "And the Lord regretted," and the Lord says that I'm sorry, I would argue that these are anthropomorphisms. Um, uh, in kind of a similar way, actually, to earlier in Genesis, whenever it said that, like, God is walking and in like the cool of the day, and God is doing this and God is doing that. Like, I would argue that those are things that the author is using to generally signal God's disposition and his actions in what he's doing towards us at that given time. Um, I do not think that that is, I don't think it is correct to suggest that the way in which emotions like regret and grief and sorrowfulness, is that right? Or uh, the act of feeling sorry, that doesn't even go with sorrow. But I think it would be wrong to assume that God experiences those emotions in the same way that we do, just because we um, experience all of these emotions in time doesn't necessitate that God does. Um, in the same way that, like, I don't think you would make the assumption that the way in which God was walking in the garden, that walking, like you can imagine that something about that walking is going to work differently than how like humans walk, right? Like I don't know what way that would be, but I'm sure it works differently. Um uh and if you don't, you then get into and if you don't, if you take it as a literal like wooden like walking, you then get put into a camp where you're gonna get put into a couple of weird camps. Like one, you're gonna start getting into like the um you're either gonna get into the Islamic camp where you're gonna have to start arguing that God the Father has body parts, um, and then you have to start to or you have to start deciding, well, is this actually like the is this Jesus? Is this a different incarnation? Is this an incarnation at all? Is this different? Like you have to start having all of those discussions, which then just makes everything a, a lot more messy. Um, and I think it's just easier to take it in a different way to say that like, okay, this is like an anthropomorphism, which means it doesn't mean that like that's not happening, but it means that however it's happening, it's probably not happening like the experience of it happening isn't one to one with a human's experience. Right? That's all I'm saying. Like I'm not saying that God didn't like create for himself a body and walk around. Like I don't know how that happened because we're going to see instances of that happening later in Genesis, right? Where there's something going on where like the Bible describes like a man showing up and that man is, the Lord, and we're going to have an argument about is it an angel, is it God, and all this stuff. And all I'm saying is that in those cases of anthropomorphism, it's pretty clear that like the existence that's going on there is operating in a different way that we are operating. And so whenever other anthropomorphisms are being made, such as the emotions that God is experiencing, I think it's reasonable to assume that they that God experiences those emotions in a slightly different way than how humans typically experience them. Um, and so I want to use that as evidence for saying just because the Lord felt regret or was grieved, that doesn't mean that he didn't know that that would happen. Um, and I would make the argument that most of what's going on in Genesis and in the Bible as a whole, actually, uh, a running theme of the Bible is, in fact, that God knows what's going to happen. And God knows what's going to happen, and He has a plan to fix what has happened and what will continue to happen. Like, God has a plan for both of those things. And yes. Hmm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's one that's yeah. They'll use change Yeah, they'll use changing his mind a lot for evidence of dynamic omniscience. Yeah. Right. Right. Yes. And it yes. But he doesn't. Yep. 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 Hmm. Well, and but it also shows that like right there's this like there's this sort of idea that like God can only have like one intention. And I don't understand why that would like be the case because that's not even the case for us, right? Like we have multiple competing intentions, um, and then we choose like which ones we go with at a time. And like to me, like, and this applies even. So this applies to that situation that you just talked about, and it applies here to this one of how can we think about this? Where I'm like, to me, it makes a whole lot more sense as to what's going on here if you just start thinking about it relationally. Um, like imagine that like so like I have a kid, right? Um, I don't have perfect foreknowledge of how I am going to interact with my child, but I have pretty good foreknowledge. And so if I have pretty good foreknowledge, we can assume that God has better foreknowledge than what I have, right? And so when my so a couple things are true. One, I know that my child is going to act bad at some point. And in fact, I might even know like the specific time that my child is going to act bad. And I can actually set up conditions in which um like I know that my child is going to act bad. Like I can put so, like, I can put a bag of cookies on the edge of the table, and I will know that as soon as like my child gets up and she comes downstairs, like she's going to try and grab those, and I'm going to yell at her, right? And I might even like at that moment of when that happens, I might regret that I put those cookies there. But maybe I put those cookies there as like a part of a test to right and for me like that's I'm seeing like right when we talk about this a little bit whenever we get into Isaac, right, and what's going with the binding of Isaac story and what's going on there, right? And part of that test might be for me, but I might also already know that she's going to fail that test, and part of performing that test might be that I'm trying to let her see that she fails that test. And was like, what? So that I can just yell at her? No, it's not so that I can just yell at her. It's so that she can, like, I am I am doing this now so that she can learn discipline and that she needs to like listen to me. Um and so that she can um so that she can like better herself, right? Like, and I might know all of these things ahead of time. And but a lot of times whenever like you listen to these guys and they think about like how intention works, they would think like, "Oh, well, you know that you're going to like forgive her or whatever in the future. So just go ahead and don't do the punishment." And it's like, "No, I have to do the punishment. I have to go through those steps in order to get the outcome that I want, which is like her repentance and her um obedience, like her obedience and her repentance. Like I need those things to occur so that she can do those things again in the future and like have a better life. um if I just skip to the forgiveness because I know that she's going to do it in the future, I don't go through those steps, right? And so like if I can have that sort of mentality about how I might experience, and it's not like I'm enjoying the experience as I go through it. Like I'm not enjoying the experience as I'm like yelling at her or punishing her or whatever, right? And it also doesn't mean that, and even if I didn't necessarily plan it, right? In any given experience, whenever she does something wrong and I yell at her, I don't think, "Oh, I'm never going to forgive her. I'm going to be mad at her for like the rest of my life." Like that's not how that works. I know that I'm probably I know that I'm going to, not probably, like I know that I am going to forgive her. I'm not like she's one. I'm not going to let something that she did whenever she's one like make me be mad at her for the rest of her life. Like that's a ridiculous thing to do. Um and so if I have that capability of knowing what my emotions are going to be like because of how I have a relationship like with my daughter, like wouldn't you say that even more so for God, he can know how he's going to relate um to like his children um in the future, and just because he knows that he's going to feel that way doesn't mean that therefore he should have like acted differently. Like that doesn't mean that like he shouldn't have had regret. It doesn't mean that he shouldn't have felt sorry. It doesn't mean that he shouldn't have grieved. None of those things apply. In fact, he should do all of those things because by God expressing all of these emotions, it helps us know that what's going on here really is like that bad. It like if if I never experienced, like if you never experience anger with your kids because you know, oh, I'm going to forgive them eventually. If I just never experience show them that I'm angry, that's actually a really bad thing to do. Um, yes, like Re- God doesn't want you to know that this is just a, if you break the rules, I'm going to punish you with a flood. It's a, I'm punishing you with a flood because you broke the rules and it hurt my heart. Right? Like that point goes like that the emotional point goes with the punishment. Yes. Um it's actually very similar. I actually just thought about this. So last weekend up at the cabin, um uh Maisie was she was like she was sitting up, she's crawling on the ground, and Braden came in the room and he like walked past her, but then he decided that he needed to get like his switch, and so he turned around and walked out, and he wasn't paying attention to where he walked, and he kneed Maisie in the head and knocked her over. And she ended up being like she was fine, but I started yelling at him, and he started crying and everything. And um and basically I was just like, look, you like crying doesn't help right now. Like you need to um like you need to say you're sorry and like try to make it better and all that stuff and yada yada, and he did and all that stuff. But I was thinking about it like more later, and I was like, should that have been like the right thing for me to do? And after thinking about it, I was like, no, actually that was the exact right thing for me to do. Like it's actually good for him to know that like a father should be very upset whenever someone hits their kid, even if they got hit accidentally. Like he should know that that makes a father angry. Like that's actually a good thing for him to be aware of. And actually, it's probably would have been more of a problem if I hadn't gotten angry. Um, it, which gets into a bunch of more like societal talks and stuff. And I would actually argue that kind of one of the things that's actually a problem with our society right now is we are not seeing people get angry about things that they should be getting angry about. um, yeah, go for it because I'm done pretty much. But yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because he knew that he was going to send Jesus and everything. Yeah. And so he did nothing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That would be bad. Yeah. Yeah, they a dynamic omniscience person would not agree with that statement in the slightest. So I don't, yeah, Like they don't even think there are paths. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fine. I was gonna end kind of all the talk on that anyways, um, and get back to the text. I don't have a ton of stuff to say about all of this. Um, uh, so let's start off with one of the things that I want to point out is the fact that um, specifically, the thing that God is mad about is that the earth is corrupt and the earth is filled with violence. Um, it is, I think, a lot of times whenever you get taught the story of Noah in kind of a Sunday school setting, um, it's just a generic people were sinful. Um, and it's not that. I mean, it is that because you could you know um, file that under the corrupt part, but it really is it's the violence. Um, and part of the reason why we know it's the violence is because the thing that he's upset about is the violence, and so it becomes that the violence is the thing that basically he's going to reflect back, right? And so I've determined to make an end of all flesh. The earth is filled with violence through them, and so behold, I will destroy them with the earth, right? And so um, this is something else that I wanted to point out is this idea of behold, I will destroy them with the earth, and so he is going to the earth is the thing that they have corrupted, and so he's going to use the earth uh, to be violent back to them, and that in that way, things will be reset. One of the things that I wanted to highlight in all of this, and we'll talk about it more next week because this kind of passage gets a little bit repeated in Genesis 7. Um, but overall, what's going on here, and I mentioned this again last week, is that there is a reset of creation going on, um, and that reset of creation can be seen in a lot of different places where it mentions like the land, animals, creeping things, birds of the heaven, and all that stuff. Um, but it can also be seen in Noah's name and the fact that Noah's name means rest. Um, and this is one of the things where I don't think, yeah, I don't think, yeah, I think I mentioned this on one of the other ones, but um, the Step Bible used to be better about giving you the meanings of people's names, and now it just tells you that it's a man that lived at that time. Um, but Noah's name, uh, the meaning of his name is rest, and so um, what we have here is the first. Um, I think I'm correct in saying this. Uh, this is the first instance of what's what could basically be referred to as something like a remnant theology. And so that idea is going to get be used throughout the rest of the Bible. Um, but you have uh, the relationship or the idea of seeds. And so um, what's happening here, right, is you have a reset that's going to take place, but the thing that is going to correct the reset or preserve God's plan through that resetting period is this remnant, is this seed. And in this case, it's almost literally a seed in the sense that um, they're going to make an ark, right? And so they make a vessel that has a hard um, outer edge. Um, that vessel and that arc, it obviously it should have in your mind should have similarities to like the Ark of the Covenant. Um, uh, if you're in a Catholic or Eastern Orthodox tradition, they're also going to say, so Ark of the Covenant itself, but then also the temple, um, the temple and the tabernacle, uh, and if, like I said, if you have like a Catholic or an Eastern Orthodox background, you're going to say that it also relates to Mary. And this is one of the things about Mary that I actually kind of give to those camps, and I kind of agree with um, that Mary is kind of acting like uh, an ark, and and basically, and so the ark is acting as um, a barrier to protect from the chaos that's going around. Um, and so, that's the way in which you should almost see it, like with what's going on with in relationship to the creation story, because like in the creation story, right, um, you have this pocket of order that's surrounded by this chaos. Um, but the thing that um, is inside of that pocket of order is also uh, more chaos, right? And so this is like the yin yang like symbol thing, right? And so that's the way in which you have waters above and waters below, right? Um, there's chaos on the outside, there's chaos on the inside, but so where's the chaos on the inside? The chaos on I didn't explain that. The chaos on the inside is Noah himself, um, right? And this is that thing of there's a connection between uh, rest and chaos. Um, uh, you can make this pretty easily. Chaos relates to death. Death relates to sleep. Sleep relates to rest, right? And this is also why you have this. You have a similar pattern and structure in the story of Jesus, right? And so, whenever Jesus, right, he is. There's the story of Jesus. Um, he's on a boat, right? He's on an ark, and there's a storm going wrong on the outside, and Jesus is inside, and he is resting, right? And uh, like that story is the same structure as the Noah story. Um, I only have 7 minutes, but so I wanted to point out those things. Um, I wanted to point out that I think the lower second and third decks, I think that goes. I think that lines up with the temple analogy. And actually, this is one of the things that should have looked it up beforehand. I don't know how to spell his name. Noah shirt. Noah's Ark. Images. Yeah, here we go. Should have just thrown this on the. So I have a shirt that has this picture on it. And right, and so he breaks it up in this image kind of differently. Um, but it's got the 3 levels. But he also does 3 levels going out. And basically, he does a thing where I believe the way that he has it is that the second level here are like the clean animals, and then this level it is all the different unclean animals. And so he has a progression going of like cleanliness of like birds and humans to clean animals to unclean animals. So there's a bunch of symbolism in that picture, and I'm just trying to highlight it. I'm not trying to bring anything else more than that, other than to say that that's one of the ways in which you can kind of make that connection to the temple itself, that it has those partitions, those internal partitions. Okay. I'm not going to make a big deal out of the dimensions. You could do that. To me, I think that the inclusion of the dimensions is really just a signal for God being particular about how he's establishing the order. The order isn't arbitrary. It's not build an ark and do whatever. It's build an ark in this way, and that I think that's similar to, again, the temple. Right? He does a similar thing with the temple. He's like, build the temple like this. Um, uh, but I'm not gonna I'm not going to do the thing that a lot of people do and try to see if there are um, a bunch of hidden meanings with the numbers, because at least on these I don't really see it. I haven't seen anything that I have felt is convincing. If any of you think that you have anything convincing, please let me know about it, and I'm happy to look into it. The last main thing that I wanted to mention, which is related to the dimensions, is that there's not really a discussion in here about the shape of the ark. And that is something that Jonathan Pageau talks about. Um, uh, but there are some traditions or whatever where the ark is actually just a straight cube. And I think those are interesting because I believe that actually some of the other, there's a bunch of other civilizations that have flood stories. And I believe that there are some of those. I might have this wrong, but I think like in Gilgamesh, the ark is also a cube. And so obviously this isn't a cube, right? Because a cube would would require all the sides to be the same, but a rectangular prism, I guess, would be the proper way to look at this. And so yeah, so those options are on the table for there's a variety of things for of theories about what the actual shape of it is, because that is not specified in all of this. That's really all I had to say. Like, I didn't have much to say about most of this section. We'll get into more of the meat of the flood story next week. And it's just you, Diego. So I don't know. Did you have anything you wanted to say? Awesome. Um, we'll talk a little bit about some JEDP documentary hypothesis stuff next week. Because when we get to Genesis 7, this story kind of seemingly repeats, and that's whenever JEDP people always pipe up and start saying things. But that's it for this week. Thanks.